the special agent in charge that
No, I
day?
wasn't. I was there representing the United States Secret Service, sir.
Mr. Fallon, your time's
did not
expired.
affect protective
Fallon,
You know
operations.
why you were
time's
there?
expired.
Because you wanted to be visible, because you are auditioning for this
I was
job.
there to
that
pay
you're not gonna
respect for a
get
fallen
come
member of
January
this
20th.
agency.
You endangered
You are
President
out of
Biden's
line,
life,
Congressman.
Vice President
You are out of
Harris's
line.
life, because you put those agents out of position.
Mr.
Did you have a
Chairman.
radio with
Mr.
you?
Fallon,
Did you
your
wear a
time
vest?
has
Did you have a
expired.
weapon?
Mr.
No.
I did, sir, and you are out of line.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
I think that's my favorite part, the Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman. What you heard was Representative Pat Fallon during a congressional hearing for the task force over the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, going at acting Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe, a shouting match. Fallon accusing Rowe of endangering President Biden's life, Vice President Harris's life, for a photo op. Joining us now on the Newsmaker Hotline is Susan Crabtree. She's the Real Clear Politics national political correspondent. She is my go-to for anything to do with the Secret Service. Extremely bright. And she has a new book that you can pre-order today called Fool's Gold, The Radicals, Con Artists, and Traitors Who Killed the California Dream and Now Threaten Us All. Susan, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Hey, thank you for joining the show. So I think my first question would be kind of zoom out and give us a breakdown on what happened yesterday during that congressional hearing for the task force over the attempted assassination of Donald Trump.
Well, from all the reporting I've been doing since the assassination attempt, I feel like this is Ron Rowe's defining moment. Sources within the Secret Service, they don't have a lot of respect for Ron Rowe. They blame him as part of the problem because he was the former Secret Service Director, Kim Cheadle's hand-picked right-hand man, and they were responsible, this leadership was responsible for denying the security assets that Donald Trump's detail, his team that surrounds him on any given day for the last 3 years, have been asking repeatedly over the course of the campaign and even before for both Mar-a-Lago and the rallies, and they were denied because he was a former president. So there is a lot of resentment over this photo op, and I had actually heard about it several months ago during the deluge of information I was getting after the first and second assassination attempts. So this was September 11th, right before the second assassination attempt that there was that weekend.
Yeah.
So this is telling moment for Ron Rowe. It's all he had to do, because he's not likely to be named the director after his record and the Secret Service's record under his leadership. So all he had to do was go out there and maintain composure and answer the questions calmly, and then he could go on to a nice private security job, as many of the top officials do, and even senior special agents do after they retire. But I don't know if I would be pleased with myself if I were Ron Rowe about the reputation damage he did yesterday.
So you think that this is going to hurt his future employment opportunities, that outburst?
Oh, I unless it's a completely partisan company and Jill Biden gets involved, as she did with Kimberly Cheadle's job to PepsiCo. She got Kimberly Cheadle, the former Secret Service director, her job at Pepsi before she became, when she was leaving the Secret Service, retired, and then he brought her back to be the Secret Service director. And there is so much left to report on this story about the corruption and the retribution that went on against real whistleblowers complaining that there was no drone program. I've scratched the surface of it, but believe me, there's more to come. And Ron Rowe is under intense pressure, and he has been. But to go to that level of, I don't think I've witnessed a screaming match quite like that in 30 years of covering Washington, D.C.
No, it was something special. Now, to my untrained eye, when that photo came out, I didn't see anything wrong with it. How bad of a failure was that for Ron Rowe?
Well, you can come. I wrote a second day story, and I feel like the headline is, "Did the Secret Service chief perjure himself in that hearing?" I've talked to eyewitnesses that were there at the event on 9/11 this year, and they said there were toe marks for each spot, and they were following protocol to put the marks to place the people in charge of the detail for President Biden and President Harris as close to them as possible, right behind them. And Ron Rowe just disregarded the toe marks, but they had their names on them. His was three rows back.
Really?
So he was supposed to be 3 rows back. And also that his wife, who was a Secret Service employee, was the official photographer for that event and was taking photos of him in his prominent position when he disregarded the original plans and protocol of placing these agents that have their earpieces in, have the guns at the ready, are getting the intelligence, are getting any known threats, and the movements are all coordinated. They have their earpieces in, they have their radios, and they have ballistic vests on. I asked the Secret Service press office yesterday. They answered my first questions about what he was doing after 9/11, the actual attack on the World Trade Center in D.C. And they answered those questions, but I asked a follow-up about whether he indeed had an earpiece, radio, and a gun. He did say he had a radio and gun. In that hearing, he did answer yes when Pat Phelan questioned him about that. And they chose not to answer that particular question.
Huh. Shocker. Now, the exchange that's gaining all the attention is Pat Fallon, but our own rep, Mark Green from Tennessee, he got into it with Ronald Rowe as well. Can you explain to me their exchange a little bit?
Yes, I noted that in my story. I felt like the hearing was very softball until Mark Green and then Pat Fallon. They're being very deferential to Ron Rowe, and that was bizarre to me because all my sources that blame him for the decisions to deny Trump the security assets, which created the opening for the assassination attempt in the first place. So basically, you promoted someone who was responsible for creating the opening for the assassination attempt. So when Mark Green was testifying and was able to had his time for questioning, he was furious, and he was saying that there was a command culture problem in the Secret Service, describing his time as a doctor in the Army, and that he had worked with these elite special forces groups, 82nd Airborne, 182nd Airborne, and he was very concerned at the time that he was up to snuff to be with that type of elite force. And that was what was on his mind. He said he was using expletives, which I understand because it is so frustrating to see Ron Rowe say, everything's fine now. In 2 months, we completely reformed the Secret Service. He was saying that the people that showed up at Butler that day were complacent and lackadaisical. That's the word he used. And he also said, use it expletive, didn't care enough. And you can imagine what he said. So basically, he was furious, and Ron Rowe kind of answered it in a vague way that he said, we're reimagining the Secret Service, and we're reforming it, and we are trying to develop leadership more than just letting people go through the motions and then get a GS-15 and get into leadership if they haven't proven themselves over time.
Insanity.
And he said nothing about the DEI, though. That did not get brought up yesterday, which I think is one of the biggest concerns in the secret and the lowering of hiring standards.
Yeah, that's a huge concern. Huge concern. Was there anything that you learned from yesterday's hearing that surprised you?
No, except for I did know about that photo op, him bigfooting and breaking protocol, but I was glad I didn't report on it because it was part of a deluge of information I was receiving at the time back in September. So I was glad to see that, and I was glad to see that it sort of broke into, you got an awareness of how Ron Rowe deals with his leadership style and the fact that he has a temper. And after that, I've heard that from people, but but after that incident yesterday, basically an outburst, people came forward to tell me that that's how he deals with people on a day-to-day basis at the Secret Service.
It would be a joy. Would be a joy to work for somebody like that, right?
I mean, it was. I mean, if he thinks that's a controversial question, he needs to. He obviously hasn't had to be held to account like so many directors and secretaries of large agencies have had. They have a $3.1 billion budget in the Secret Service, and now they're asking for more money. They've already gotten a supplemental appropriations from Congress this year of 200-something million. So the fact that would upset him so quickly is just telling to me about who he really is, what his leadership and temperament are like.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think one of the things that frustrates me the most about the hearing, though, is that this is what's capturing headlines, and it still doesn't seem like we know much about Thomas Matthew Crooks at all. Was there any new information on Thomas Matthew Crooks yesterday, or any information on motive or anything, any of the questions that we want answered yesterday?
No, and on the Crooks question, that's a question for the FBI, because they're the ones looking into his background, and they are not being forthcoming about these encrypted apps that Thomas Crooks used that were foreign. If people in the United States usually use Signal or WhatsApp, these foreign apps, they won't even tell us what the names of the foreign apps, what companies he was using. So it's been a black box in terms of who Thomas Crooks is and why was his social media non-existent. But I think it begs the question, and I hope that if Kash Patel gets in there and whoever is leading the FBI in the future, we can get to the bottom of that, because I don't buy that we don't know more information about him. I don't buy that he had no social media presence.
You stole my follow-up question. I was going to say, do you think Kash Patel could fix that? I
do.
All right, perfect. Well, I'll skip to the next question then. Have you heard rumors of Dan Bongino as U.S. Secret Service Director?
Yes, but he did on X take his name out of the running in two posts about a week and a half ago, and he said he was better on the outside, and he said politics is a dirty business. So
if you were making a dream pick, who would you want to be in charge of the agency?
Oh, I have. Okay, so there's everyone's controversial. You please no one when you go down this road.
Perfect. This is exactly the kind of answer I like.
So there's a Del Armas is a Marine general, and he was served in the Secret Service for 11 years, I believe, several years. And he then went to the Marines because he thought the Secret Service had a corrupt culture. And he was a hero on 9/11. He actually was the one who ran into the buildings. There's a video of him. Actually, Dan Bongino had him on his Fox show on 1 year, and I posted about it. He seems like the type of upstanding individual who is the training in the Marines, the no-nonsense training that could really change things. There's also other people that are former Secret Service members that I believe have the integrity and have shown themselves to. You kind of need someone who has been in the Secret Service and has contacts to know where the bad apples are.
Yep.
And landmines. So, but I also think that there's a dark horse that Eric Prince could be a dark horse candidate, because I know he has Don Jr.'s ear, and he testified on a panel with members of Congress after a panel I appeared upon at the Heritage Foundation in August. And he was highly critical, and he has also been in recent media interviews, including on Maria Bartoloma, saying that they need to supplement the Secret Service with maybe Special Forces units.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's controversial, obviously, and so Eric Prince's pick would be extremely controversial, but because he had his history of problems with killing civilians in Iraq, But Donald Trump pardoned those individuals that were found guilty of wrongdoing his employees. And so that shows you what type of relationship he has with Eric Prince. And Eric Prince never failed to protect. He never lost a protectee. He's never lost a protectee ever in Iraq or otherwise.
Hey, well, I would be fine with that. I think anything would be an upgrade from Ronald Rowe. Let's be perfectly honest. Susan Crabtree from Real Clear Politics. Where can we keep up with you and find your latest reporting?
Thank you so much for asking. I'm at x.com at Susan Crabtree and at realclearpolitics.com. If you go to the writers and click on the writers on the top of the website, it'll have my name. You click on that, has every single story I've done for Real Clear Politics in 4 or 5 years.
Perfect. We'll definitely go there to find your reporting. And you got a new book out. In Tennessee, we have a lot of California transplants, and I think that this book would be a perfect gift for a California transplant. Tell me about Fool's Gold.
Fool's Gold, thank you so much for asking. It's coming out in March, and I spent a year and a half investigating all of the failures, and I was astounded. I live in California now. I was astounded by just the crony corruption in Sacramento and in San Francisco and the history that Gavin Newsom has, his ineffectiveness on homelessness, on his attacks on the way he got his Getty money. He's not a self-made man. We delve into, it's a deep, deep dive into all these things, but also how Gavin Newsom sold the state out to China. As I did, my co-author works for Peter Schweitzer's nonprofit, the Government Accountability Institute. And so there's a lot of information about that's their specialty, and they broke a lot of news on Hunter Biden's exploits in China and corrupt dealings. And we have the same kind of thing going on in California. Governor Newsom sold out the state, especially when having to do with the solar business and the EV business.
Well, looking forward to the book. We can pre-order it today. You go find Susan Crabtree on X at Susan Crabtree. Thank you for joining the show as always. And if you need to get out of California, Tennessee is a much, much better state, I promise.
I heard that. It's very tempting. Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
Anytime. Thank you, Susan.